The Marines Malevolent are a loyalist chapter of the Adeptus Astartes created during the course of an unknown founding, although the chapter has been recorded within Imperial records as early as M32. Despite serving the Imperium faithfully for several millennia and claiming many noteworthy victories against the enemies of man, the Marines Malevolent are a chapter that has gained a measure of infamy and notoriety for not only their sheer brutality and ruthlessness upon the battlefield, but also for their callous disregard for weakness, as well as any collateral damage or casualties that are caused by their actions. The chapter wholeheartedly believes that the ends justify the means, regardless as to whether innocent civilians or even their own allies are caught in the ensuing crossfire. This sense of brutal pragmatism displayed by the chapter's warriors was most notably demonstrated during the course of the Third Armageddon War. When a force of 5,000 orcs infiltrated and captured a refugee camp that lay within close proximity to Hades' hive, taking over 12,000 civilians hostage, Captain Finia of the chapter's second company would order for his company's whirlwind artillery tanks to bombard the camp for over 6 hours in order to destroy the orcs. Those greenskins that survived the initial barrage would be pinned down by the unrelenting torrent of missile fire, allowing the Marines Malevolent to eventually move in and eliminate the remaining pockets of resistance, although the chapter's actions would result in over 4,000 civilian deaths. Despite this, Vinyar would justify his actions by stating that the refugees were simply unworthy of life, due to the fact that they had refused to fight against the orcish hordes and had instead chosen to flee for their lives like cowards. This act of needless slaughter would draw the ire of the Salamanders chapter, who, unlike the Marines Malevolent, actively and repeatedly sought to protect the world's populace from harm. Tushan, the chapter master of the Salamanders, would not only verbally rebuke the Marines Malevolent for their actions, but would even lay out Captain Vinyar with a single blow to the head. This, in addition to their differing ideologies, has resulted in a bitter enmity forming between the two chapters, which continues even to this day. Because of their willingness, if not over-eagerness, to slaughter innocent civilians in order to accomplish their objectives, many high-ranking officials throughout both the Imperial government and military would request for the Inquisition to conduct an official investigation into the chapter's actions. Despite these repeated calls for censure, no taint of corruption or signs of heresy have officially been detected within the ranks of the Marines Malevolent, and the chapter continues to employ the use of such horrific yet undeniably effective tactics in order to achieve victory. And yet, while the chapter has been active for thousands of years, being one of the earliest chapters to be founded following the introduction of the Codex Astartes, the parent legion and primogenitor primarch of the Marines Malevolent currently remains undocumented within official records. So from which of the first founding legions could the Marines Malevolent be descended from? Of the 9 loyalist legions, at least 3 can be ruled out with any degree of certainty as being the potential primogenitors of the Marines Malevolent: the Space Wolves, Blood Angels, and Raven Guard, due to various genetic traits. The Space Wolves, prior to the Ultima founding, would establish only a single successor chapter, the Wolf Brothers. Over time, the various components found within the 6th Legion's gene seed stocks would mutate and degrade to such an extreme degree that only those native to their home world of Fenris were capable of surviving the gene seed implantation process. Because of this, the Wolf Brothers would eventually be driven into extinction, as they would prove unable to induct any additional recruits into the chapter's ranks. The Marines Malevolent also appear to lack any of the genetic or psychological characteristics that are shared by the Blood Angels and their successor chapters, such as the Red Thirst, a genetic flaw which instills an unnatural hunger for blood, or the Black Rage, a psychological flaw that causes those who succumb to it to believe that they are the Primarch Sanguinius moments before his death during the final hours of the Horus Heresy. While it is potentially possible that the Marines Malevolent was simply lucky enough to have not developed such flaws within their gene seed, similar to how the Lamenters chapter would only begin manifesting such defects around the onset of the Badab War, it seems fairly inconceivable for a Blood Angel successor chapter to avoid the effects of both the Black Rage and Red Thirst for close to 8,000 years. The Marines Malevolent also appear to share none of the genetic traits displayed by the Raven Guard and their successor chapters, which result in those that bear Coraxian gene seed to develop exceptionally pale flesh and black eyes, thanks in part to a number of deficiencies displayed by their melanchromic organ. Since the warriors of the Marines Malevolent are noted to exhibit a variety of skin tones and hair colours, this would strongly suggest that they are not descended from the Raven Guard. In addition to these three aforementioned legions, two others can arguably be ruled out as being the parent legion of the Marines Malevolent, the Salamanders and Imperial Fists. The Salamanders, in addition to having an overly active melanchromic organ, which causes the chapter's warriors to develop onyx black skin and red eyes, were the sole legion to be exempt from being divided into chapters, resulting in the Salamanders officially having no successor chapters. While this would appear to support the idea that the Marines Malevolent are not descended from the 18th Legion, a number of later founding chapters, such as the Black Dragons and Storm Giants, are rumoured to be Salamander's successors, although this remains unconfirmed. But given that the Marines Malevolent were founded sometime during M32, roughly 1,000 years after the onset of the Horus Heresy, it seems unlikely, though admittedly not impossible, for the chapter to be descended from Salamander genetic stock. It would also appear somewhat unlikely for the Imperial Fists to have sided the Marines Malevolent for two specific reasons. The first of which is that the Imperial Fists are well documented as lacking two of an Astartes' specialist organs, the Betcher's gland, which allows a Space Marine to produce an acidic saliva, and the Susan membrane, which allows a Space Marine to enter a self-induced state of suspended animation. Since the Marines Malevolent have themselves not been documented as lacking any of these implants, this would appear to support the notion that they are not born of Dornian stock. The second reason comes from the short story, Venge for Lorna, following an incident that occurred between the Marines Malevolent and the Black Templars. When the Marines Malevolent laid their eyes upon the Black Templars, they specifically referred to the chapter's warriors as the Sons of Dawn, as opposed to fellow Sons of Dawn. While such evidence may prove to be circumstantial at best, the language used within this story does appear to heavily imply that the Black Templars and Marines Malevolent have differing genetic lineages. As such, this would appear to leave four potential candidates in regards to which loyalist legion sired the Marines Malevolent: the Ultramarines, Dark Angels, Iron Hands, and White Scars. Statistically speaking, the most likely possibility is that the Marines Malevolent are descended from the 13th Legion of the Legione Astartes, the Ultramarines. This is due primarily to the fact that the Ultramarines Legion would go on to sire the greatest number of successor chapters, thanks to not only the sheer size of the 13th Legion itself, but also due to the purity and stability of their gene seed stocks. In addition, it is also worth noting that the majority of chapters that utilize the prefix of Marines, such as the Marines Errant and Marines Mordant, are themselves descended from the Ultramarines. However, while the idea of a similar naming convention may seem like a reasonable connection to make between the two chapters, it is important to state that this is not always the case. For example, the Fire Angels chapter, despite bearing a name that would initially suggest some sort of connection to either the Dark Angels or Blood Angels chapters due to the use of Angel in their name, are in actuality an Ultramarine successor chapter. Nonetheless, the odds of the Marines Malevolent being the Sons of Guilliman are still reasonably high. The second most likely possibility, however, is that the Marines Malevolent are descended from the 10th Legion of the Legione Astartes, the Iron Hands. The reasoning for this is primarily due to a number of psychological traits that are shared by both chapters. Like the Marines Malevolent, the Iron Hands are famed for being cold, brutal, and utterly unforgiving warriors who hold a special disdain for most if not all forms of weakness. Such contempt even extends to their own physiology, as the warriors of the Iron Hands will, over time, replace much of their body with various bionics and cybernetic prostheses. However, this latter trait, which is noted to be not uncommon within Iron Hand's successor chapters, appears to be utterly absent from the Marines Malevolent. Despite this does not necessarily disprove any connection between the two chapters. For example, the Star Dragons chapter, instead of making extensive use of bionics, practiced ritual scarification and the implantation of electronic tattoos to create bright and vivid patterns across their skin. Although it should be mentioned that the Star Dragons are themselves only speculated to be descended from the 10th Legion, as opposed to being a confirmed Iron Hand successor. In addition, the Marines Malevolent, as detailed within the novel Salamander, are one of the few chapters that continue to adhere to the terms laid out within the Edict of Nicaea, a diktat made by the Emperor during the later years of the Great Crusade, which forbade the use of psykers throughout the ranks of the Legione Astartes. The Iron Hands Legion were themselves known to be vehemently anti-psyker, and their legion's representative at the Council of Nicaea was shown to be strongly in favour of the edict. Because of this would appear to further support the notion that the Marines Malevolent are descended from the 10th Legion. It would, however, appear less likely for the Marines Malevolent to be descended from the Dark Angels. This is due to the fact that the Marines Malevolent not only appear to lack the unique organisational structure found within those chapters descended from the First Legion, such as any equivalents to both the Deathwing and Ravenwing companies, but the chapter also appears to have never taken part in the secret mission of the Unforgiven, the Hunt for the Fallen, those members of the original Dark Angels Legion that turned traitor during the course of the Horus Heresy. While the first company of the Marines Malevolent, known as the Vilifiers, does indeed appear to be somewhat unique when compared to the majority of other Space Marine chapters, the warriors of this company appear to wear a mix of power armor and Terminator warplate, whereas the Deathwing companies of the Unforgiven, prior to the introduction of Primaris Marines, wore Terminator armor exclusively. While it is still possible for the Marines Malevolent to instead be descended from the White Scars, there is little else to support this particular hypothesis, save for the fact that the gene seed stocks of both chapters are relatively pure and untainted. While it seems to be all but a certainty for the Marines Malevolent to be descended from the Ultramarines, Iron Hands, White Scars, or perhaps even the Dark Angels, there also exists a possibility, albeit a minute one, that the chapter is descended from one of the traitor legions, specifically the 4th Legion of the Legione Astartes, the Iron Warriors. While it may initially seem somewhat unlikely for the Marines Malevolent to be descended from traitor stock, there do exist several minor pieces of evidence which appear to support such a possibility. The first of which, in a manner similar to that of the Iron Hands, is that the Marines Malevolent and Iron Warriors share a number of psychological traits, such as their brutality, disdain for weakness, and callous disregard for casualties and collateral damage. Secondly, since the Marines Malevolent were created during one of the earliest known foundings, despite the specific founding itself remaining unknown, it is potentially possible that the founding members of the chapter were members of the 4th Legion that remained loyal to the Emperor during the course of the Horus Heresy. Of all the traitor legions, the Iron Warriors would arguably spawn the greatest number of loyalists. Such examples include not only those warriors under the command of the warsmith Barabbas d'Antioch, but also the 77th and 114th Grand Battalions, with the former, a garrison force under the command of Keir Valen, choosing to remain loyal to the Emperor upon learning of their legion's betrayal, and the latter, led by Narek Draeger, turning against their Alpha Legion allies and instead choosing to side with the loyalist Salamanders Legion. Because at least 2 Grand Battalions of Iron Warriors remained loyal to the Imperium during the course of the Horus Heresy, with such battalions being the 4th Legion equivalent to chapters, then it wouldn't be entirely unreasonable to assume that these Grand Battalions may have officially become their own independent chapters following the introduction of the Codex Astartes. As such, the Marines Malevolent could theoretically be descended from one of these 2 loyalist Grand Battalions. Not only this, but the Iron Warriors were also known to view psykers with distrust and disdain, with the 4th Legion representative at the Council of Nicaea also being in favour of the edict, similar to how the Marines Malevolent, as mentioned earlier, continue to follow the terms laid out within the Emperor's decree. An additional yet admittedly weak piece of potential supporting evidence in this regard is shown with how the chapter's warriors decorate their war gear. The The weaponry of the Marines Malevolent has often been shown bearing a black and yellow hazard stripe pattern, which is an aesthetic choice most commonly associated with the Iron Warriors, although this admittedly could be little more than a coincidence. Regardless as to which legion they are descended from, the Marines Malevolent will continue to wage their eternal war against the Imperium's foes, even if their acts of cruelty and wanton disregard for innocent life will gain them few friends in doing so. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.